There is a specific kind of quiet that lives inside people who have carried too much for too long. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. Not the kind you find sitting by a lake on a Sunday morning when the world feels soft and unhurried. This is a different quiet. It is the kind that settles in your chest after years of keeping things together, after years of being the one who held the room steady while everything inside you trembled. It is the quiet of someone who learned, somewhere along the way, that being loud about your pain was a luxury you could not afford. Maybe you are lying awake right now. Maybe it is past midnight and the house is still and your body is tired, but your mind refuses to rest. You are not thinking about anything dramatic. You are just there, hovering in that strange space between exhaustion and alertness. And somewhere in that space, a thought surfaces. Something like, when did I become this person? That question is not dramatic either. It is quiet, like you. But it carries the weight of everything you have not said. This is not a video about fixing yourself. There is nothing here to fix. This is a video about understanding what happened to you, and maybe, for the first time, giving it a name. Stay with me for a little while. You are probably the kind of person others describe as strong, reliable, the one who keeps their head when everyone else is falling apart. People come to you with their problems because you always seem to know what to say. You listen well. You give. You show up. You are the first one there and the last one to leave. And somehow, through all of it, you manage to look like it is not costing you anything. But here's what you actually do when you get home. You close the door. You sit down, maybe on the edge of the bed, maybe on the kitchen floor, and you just breathe. Not because you are practicing mindfulness, because breathing is the only thing you know how to do in that moment that does not require anything from anyone. You probably do not ask for help easily. Not because you are proud, but because asking feels dangerous in a way that is hard to explain. Something in you tightens at the idea of being a burden. You would rather figure it out alone, no matter how long it takes, no matter how tired you are, than risk making someone else uncomfortable with your needs. You have become so fluent in other people's emotional languages that your own feels like something you read once in a book, but never actually learn to speak. You are good at sensing when someone in a room is upset before they say a word. You adjust yourself almost without thinking. You become a little smaller, a little more agreeable. You smooth things over. You learned this skill young, and at the time, it was survival. Now it just runs in the background all the time, like software you can no longer uninstall. And sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary day, you feel this strange grief, not for anything specific, just a sadness that arrives like weather, unannounced, and sits with you until it decides to leave. You have wondered, more than once, whether something is wrong with you. There is not. Let me explain what actually happened. There is a concept in psychology called emotional hypervigilance. The term sounds clinical, but the experience of it is anything but. Emotional hypervigilance is what happens when your nervous system learns, over a long period of time, that the world is unpredictable, that safety is conditional, that love, attention, or peace might be here today and gone tomorrow, and the only way to manage that uncertainty is to stay alert, always, to watch for signs, to read rooms, to anticipate needs before they become demands, to disappear when disappearing keeps the peace. But before it was ever called anything, it was just your life. It was the way you learned to navigate your early world. Maybe the environment you grew up in was loud, volatile, unpredictable. Maybe it was quiet in the wrong ways, cold where it should have been warm. Maybe there was not a single dramatic event, but rather a long, slow accumulation of moments where your feelings were dismissed, your needs were invisible, or your worth was made to feel like something you had to earn. You adapted. Of course you did. That is what humans do. You developed strategies. You became perceptive, patient, self-sufficient. You learned to need less, to want less, to shrink the space you took up so that you became easy to keep around. Psychologists call these adaptations coping mechanisms. And they were good ones. They kept you functional. They kept relationships intact. They helped you survive environments that were genuinely hard to survive. The part no one tells you is that these same mechanisms do not know when the threat has passed. The nervous system that learned vigilance as survival does not automatically unlearn it when the danger is gone. It keeps running the same program, even in safe rooms, even with people who are genuinely kind, even when, by all external measures, your life is fine. And this is where it gets quietly painful. What saved you then can imprison you now. Here is the layer beneath the layer, because there is always a layer beneath the layer. The patterns you carry do not just show up in obvious ways. They are not always visible as anxiety or people-pleasing, though those are real. They also live in the way you relate to your own success. People who have suffered too much often have a complicated relationship with good things. When something goes well, there is sometimes a reflexive waiting, a bracing, as if the good thing is a setup for something bad that is coming, as if joy is a debt that will eventually be collected. This is not pessimism, it is conditioning. When your early experiences taught you that good things are temporary and bad things are inevitable, your brain builds a model of the world that operates on that logic. Even decades later, even after everything has changed, there is also something that happens in relationships specifically. You might find that you are drawn to people who need you, not consciously, not as a manipulation, but somewhere deep down, the familiar dynamic of giving without receiving feels like love. It feels like home, because it is what home felt like. And when someone actually tries to care for you in return, fully without conditions, something in you does not know what to do with it. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like it might not last. So you either minimize it or unconsciously test it or slowly move away from it. I didn't know how to be loved without earning it first. This is not a character flaw. This is a deeply understandable consequence of a specific kind of history. Psychologists who study attachment theory describe this as an anxious or disorganized attachment style, formed when early caregiving was inconsistent, absent, or frightening. The child who does not know whether a parent will be warm or cold, present or withdrawn, loving or punishing, learns that closeness is both desired and dangerous, and that child grows up, but the attachment pattern travels with them. The unexpected twist, the one that takes people a long time to see, is this: the suffering did not only wound you, it also gave you things, real things, the perceptiveness, the depth, the ability to hold space for others in pain because you know what pain actually feels like from the inside. The resilience, the genuine kind that is not performed but earned. The sensitivity that makes you notice what most people miss. You did not get to choose whether to receive those gifts. They came at a cost you did not agree to pay, but they are yours. And there is something profound and painful about that truth, sitting inside it without rushing to resolve it. Now here is the moment in the script where most videos would start building toward the triumphant turn. The part where the music swells and you are told that you are stronger than you know, that everything happens for a reason, that your suffering made you beautiful. This is not that moment, because the truth is harder and truer than that. Here it is. You have been surviving for so long that you forgot you are allowed to just live. That is the sentence. That is the whole thing. All the complexity, all the psychology, all the patterns and mechanisms and attachment styles and adaptive strategies come down to this one quiet, devastating fact. At some point, surviving became so automatic, so total, so much a part of who you are, that you stopped knowing the difference between being safe and being guarded, between being present and being on watch, between resting and waiting for the next thing to endure. You are so good at enduring. You are extraordinary at it, but endurance was never supposed to be the whole story of your life. I got so good at surviving that I forgot what I was surviving for. Let that sit for a moment, just a moment, because the next part is not a solution, it is an invitation. The shift that becomes possible, not guaranteed, not easy, but possible, is the shift from asking, how do I manage this, to asking, how did this begin, and does it still belong to me? That question is the beginning of something. Not healing in the way it is sold online, not a linear journey with a clear destination, but something more like an archaeology, a slow and careful excavation of the self. Shadow work is a term from Jungian psychology. Carl Jung described the shadow as the parts of ourselves we have hidden, rejected, or buried, usually because someone or something taught us those parts were unwanted. For people who have suffered too much, the shadow often contains things like need, anger, the desire to be chosen first for once, the grief that was never allowed to be grief, the younger self who wanted so much more than they got and learned to stop wanting. You do not have to do dramatic work to begin this. You do not have to burn your life down or move to a monastery. You can begin in very small ways. You can begin by noticing when you automatically minimize your own discomfort, noticing when you say "I'm fine" and feel the gap between those words and what is actually true, noticing when you are giving from fullness versus giving from fear of what happens if you do not give. The inner child framework, another lens from psychology, asks something even quieter. It asks you to consider that somewhere inside you, there is still a younger version of yourself who never received what they needed. Not as a metaphor, as a genuine neurobiologically real aspect of your emotional experience. The grief you feel for no apparent reason, that is often that younger self finally finding space to be sad about things they were not allowed to be sad about when they actually happened. You cannot give that part of you what they needed back then. That time is gone. But you can give them something in the present. The acknowledgement that what happened was hard, that they were not too much, that their needs were not a burden, that they deserved more than they got. The one thing I needed to hear as a child, I can finally say to myself now, this is not sentimental. This is the actual neurological work of self-compassion, the rewiring that happens when you offer yourself the same quality of presence and care that you have always offered everyone else. It will feel strange at first. It might feel false. That strangeness is information. It tells you how unfamiliar the experience of self-directed kindness actually is for you. Do not let that strangeness stop you. There is a researcher named Kristin Neff who has spent decades studying self-compassion, not as a warm feeling, but as a practice, a measurable psychological stance. Her work shows that self-compassion, which is made of three components, self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness, is one of the most powerful predictors of psychological resilience and emotional recovery. Not confidence, not optimism, compassion toward the self. For people who have suffered a great deal, this is often the hardest skill to develop. Not because they are incapable of compassion, they are usually extraordinarily capable of it toward others. It is that directing it inward requires dismantling the belief, the deeply coded belief, that they do not deserve the same care they give away so freely. You do. That is not a motivational statement. That is just a fact. Come back to the room you are in right now. It does not have to be a dramatic room. It can be ordinary. A small kitchen, an apartment, a couch at 2 a.m. in a city that hums outside your window. The world outside is doing what it does, and you are here, inside it, having arrived at this moment through everything you have carried. You are still here. That is not nothing. There is a particular kind of person who reads something like this and thinks, quietly but clearly, yes, but my pain is not that serious. Other people have it worse, and maybe that thought is already moving through you right now. That thought is also a pattern. The habit of minimizing your own experience is one of the first things that suffering teaches you. If your pain was consistently treated as inconvenient, exaggerated, or irrelevant, you learned to be the first one to dismiss it. You got ahead of the dismissal by doing it yourself. You became your own best critic, your own most efficient denier. But scale does not determine validity. Pain is not a competition with a ranking system. Your experience does not need to be the worst possible experience in order to deserve attention, care, and the room to be real. What you went through was real. What it cost you was real. The person it shaped you into is real. All of them. The strong parts and the broken parts, and the parts that are still figuring out how to trust. There is no hierarchy of suffering that puts your story below the threshold of mattering. You are allowed to take up space in your own narrative. I spent so long making my pain smaller, I forgot I was making myself smaller too. There is a question worth sitting with, not to answer tonight, but to carry forward. It is this: who would you be if you no longer had to be strong? Not weak, not broken, not helpless, just not performing strength as a constant, exhausting default. Who is the version of you that exists on the other side of the armor? Most people who have suffered deeply have spent so little time with that version of themselves that the question feels almost unanswerable. The armor has been on for so long it stopped feeling like armor and started feeling like skin. The vigilance stopped feeling like effort and started feeling like personality. The self-sufficiency stopped being a skill and became an identity. And there is a grief in releasing those things, a genuine, legitimate grief, because they kept you safe. They were built with care by a younger version of you who was doing their best with what they had. You can honor those strategies for what they were without letting them be the whole of what you are. That is not a contradiction. That is what growing actually looks like. It looks like saying, "This served me once and it no longer needs to run my life." It looks like noticing the hypervigilance without obeying it, feeling the impulse to shrink and choosing slowly, carefully, imperfectly not to. Setting down the responsibility for everyone else's emotional state for just one afternoon and seeing what happens. It looks like tolerating the discomfort of being cared for, letting someone help you without immediately figuring out how to repay them, receiving a compliment without deflecting it, asking for what you need once and seeing that the ceiling does not fall in. These are not big gestures, they are small, quiet reversals, and they accumulate. The science of neuroplasticity tells us that the brain remains capable of change far longer than we were once taught. New relational experiences, even small ones, can begin to update the nervous system's model of the world. The brain that learned closeness is dangerous can, over time and through experience, begin to learn something different. Not overnight, not without setbacks, but genuinely. You are not permanently the person that pain made you into. You are the person who is deciding right now, today, in whatever small way is available to you, what comes next. That is not nothing either. There is an image that returns to me at the end of videos like this, and it is quiet, ordinary, like everything in this script has tried to be. It is the image of a person, early in the morning, before anyone else is awake. There is light coming through a window. Not dramatic light, not golden and cinematic, just the ordinary gray-white light of a day beginning. And this person is sitting with a cup of something warm, and they are not performing anything. They are not being strong. They are not managing anyone's feelings. They are not bracing for what comes next. They are just there in the morning, breathing, present, alive in a way that is not about endurance. That image is not a fantasy. It is not a reward for completing some journey. It is available to you in ordinary increments, on ordinary mornings, in the middle of an ordinary life that is yours. You have carried so much for so long, and you are still here, which means part of you always believed, even when it was hard to believe, that the carrying was worth it, that there was something on the other side of all this weight worth arriving at. There still is, not a perfect life, not an absence of pain, not the eradication of everything that was hard, but something quieter and truer than all of that. A life where you do not have to earn your own presence. A life where your needs are not a burden you apologize for. A life where the part of you that suffered so much is not hidden away out of shame, but is understood, held, given the dignity of being named. You were not born to endure everything alone, and if no one has said this to you in a way that landed, you were allowed to need more than you got. You were allowed to be that much. You still are. The window you are sitting next to right now, or the one you will sit next to tomorrow morning, lets in the same light it always has. You are just slowly learning to let it land on you without flinching. That is enough. That is quietly and completely enough.